Before we dive into today's terrifying tale, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a spine-chilling story. Let's get into it. The dangerous request.
I was bored. It was the kind of mind-numbing boredom that comes from being a college student in the middle of a semester, where everything feels like a repetitive blur of lectures and assignments. So, when my roommate dared me to explore the deep web, something I'd always avoided out of a mix of curiosity and fear, I decided to take him up on it. Navigating through the deep web was like stepping into a digital underworld, a place that seemed both thrilling and terrifying. My screen flickered as I stumbled upon a site that was unlike anything I'd seen before. It was slick, unervingly professional, with an interface that looked almost too polished for something so clandestine. The homepage boasted in bold letters, "We can grant any wish for a price." I remember feeling a shiver run down my spine as I scrolled through the site, my eyes darting around as if expecting someone to burst in and catch me. The site had this unsettling atmosphere, like it was alive with something sinister. I told myself it was all a joke, but the site's eerie professionalism made me question if there was something to it. On a whim, driven more by a mix of skepticism and thrill than anything else, I decided to make a wish. I typed it in as a half-hearted joke, "I wish to be rich and successful." It felt ridiculous, like I was playing a part in a bad horror movie. I clicked the Submit button, dismissing it as a harmless prank. Days later, the first sign of something strange came when I received an unexpected job offer. It was an impressive position, far beyond what I'd hoped for so early in my career. Then, to my utter disbelief, I won a large sum of money in a lottery I'd forgotten entering. It was like everything I'd ever wanted was falling into my lap. But with the sudden influx of good fortune came something else, something darker. I began to notice strange shadows lurking in the corners of my vision, moving just out of sight. I'd hear whispers in the dead of night, hushed voices that seemed to come from nowhere. And the worst part, the feeling of being watched, of eyes on me even when I was alone in my room. At first, I tried to brush it off as my imagination running wild. After all, things were going so well, why would I complain? But deep down, I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that I had stumbled into something far more dangerous than I'd ever anticipated. The more I enjoyed my newfound success, the more the unease crept in, and I couldn't help but wonder if that innocent-sounding wish had unleashed something far darker than I could ever have imagined. The wish had been granted, but not in the way I had imagined. My career took off with a speed that was almost too good to be true. Promotions came one after another, and my bank account grew fat with money I hadn't worked hard for. At first, it felt like I had hit the jackpot, but it quickly soured as my colleagues began acting strangely around me. Their smiles seemed forced, their eyes darting away when I approached. It was as if my success had put a rift between us, leaving me feeling isolated and unwelcome. The distance didn't stop there. My friends and family, once close, now seemed to avoid me. My calls went unanswered, and when I did manage to catch someone in person, their conversations were curt and evasive. I tried to reach out, to understand what was happening, but their avoidance only deepened my sense of isolation. Then came the gut-wrenching news. One of my closest friends had vanished without a trace. No one knew where he had gone or why, but the timing felt too coincidental to ignore. The more my life seemed to spiral out of control, the more I became convinced that something was terribly wrong. The sense of unease grew stronger, and it wasn't just the social isolation. My apartment, once a safe haven, became a place of creeping dread. Objects moved on their own, books falling from shelves, lights flickering inexplicably. I would hear footsteps in my empty apartment, the sound of someone walking through my living room when I knew I was alone. It was as if the very walls were closing in on me, each creak and whisper a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond my comprehension. My nightmares were the worst of all. They were vivid and nightmarish, blurring the line between reality and dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the feeling of terror so palpable that it lingered even after I was awake. Faces from my nightmares seemed to follow me in the waking world, their expressions twisted with malevolent glee. Desperate to undo what I had done, I tried to return to the website, hoping for a way to reverse my wish. But the site had vanished, replaced by a blank page that mocked my desperation. My panic grew with each passing day. I could feel the darkness closing in, and no matter where I looked, there was no escape from the growing nightmare that my life had become. I was trapped in a twisted reality, my every attempt to rectify the situation only deepening the horror. The more I tried to fix things, the more everything seemed to fall apart. The darkness was real, and it was stalking me, leaving me to face the consequences of my reckless wish. The more my wealth and success grew, the more I began to understand the dark price of my wish. My life was a paradox. I had everything I'd ever wanted, yet my personal world was falling apart. The isolation from friends and family had deepened. The odd behaviors of my colleagues had evolved into outright hostility. I felt like a pariah, cloaked in wealth but devoid of genuine connection. It was during this time that I started to see him, the shadowy figure. At first, it was just a flicker at the edge of my vision, a fleeting presence that I could dismiss as my imagination. But soon, he was everywhere. I'd catch glimpses of him following me down the street or standing just outside my apartment window, his form shrouded in darkness. The feeling of being watched turned into a constant, oppressive reality. As my paranoia grew, I began to notice unsettling evidence linking my success to the suffering around me. I found articles about tragic accidents and mysterious deaths that occurred shortly after I'd achieved certain milestones. My mind raced as I pieced together the connections. Success and good fortune seemed to come at the expense of others' lives. It was as if my rise had triggered a chain reaction of misfortunes. Desperation drove me back to the deep web, searching for any clue that could explain my situation. I uncovered disturbing stories from others who had made similar wishes. They spoke of cursed riches and sinister forces that had taken hold of their lives. Their fates were horrifying, endless torment and ultimate destruction. Each story I read sent chills down my spine, making my own situation feel like a nightmarish echo of theirs. In my frantic search, I managed to find contact information for one of the few survivors who had managed to escape the curse. Our communication was limited to cryptic messages and unsettling warnings. The survivor explained that the curse could only be broken by making an even greater sacrifice, one that demanded something of immense personal value. The idea of making a sacrifice was horrifying, but the thought of being trapped in this nightmarish reality was even worse. I knew I had to act, but I was paralyzed by the enormity of the decision. The shadowy figure's presence grew more intense, as if urging me to make my choice. The fear of what I might have to give up was overwhelming. The darkness had taken hold, and the only way to break free was to confront it head-on. The survivor's words echoed in my mind. A greater sacrifice was required, and I was left to grapple with the terrifying reality that escaping this curse might demand more than I could bear. The reality of the curse hit me with a jolt. To break free, I had to make an immense personal sacrifice. I was left with a chilling choice: give up something of profound value or face the impending doom. The shadowy figure became increasingly aggressive, his presence growing more insistent and terrifying. He appeared in my dreams with a malevolent grin, and his figure seemed to lurk in every corner of my waking life, whispering threats and pushing me to the brink of madness. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. The fear of what I might lose gnawed at me, and the weight of my decision felt crushing. The thought of sacrificing someone close to me, someone I cared about, was unbearable. I could imagine the pain it would cause, and the horror of knowing that I had brought such misery upon another person. The shadowy figure seemed to feed off my internal struggle, growing stronger with each passing moment. The decision tormented me. I agonized over my options, weighing the potential destruction of my own life against the suffering I might cause others. My nightmares grew more intense, filled with visions of those I loved being harmed or disappearing. Each dream blurred the lines between reality and fantasy, leaving me in a constant state of fear. The climax of my ordeal came one night when the figure appeared more vividly than ever before. He stood in my room, his eyes glowing with a malevolent fire. His presence was suffocating, and I felt a crushing weight on my chest as he spoke. "Make your choice," he said, his voice echoing with an otherworldly menace. "Sacrifice someone dear to you or face your own end. The price must be paid." Driven to the edge of my sanity, I made a fateful decision. I chose to sacrifice my own life in an attempt to break the curse. It was a decision born out of desperation, hoping that by offering myself, I could spare others from the torment I had endured. I was ready to face whatever consequences awaited me, convinced that this was the only way out. But as I prepared for the ultimate act of sacrifice, the shadowy figure revealed a horrifying twist. With a cruel, twisted smile, He informed me that the choice was never as simple as it seemed. The sacrifice I had chosen might not be enough to break the curse. There were layers to the darkness I had unleashed, and the price could be even higher than I had anticipated. In that moment, the full weight of my mistake crashed down upon me. The figure's revelation left me paralyzed, staring into the abyss of my own making, knowing that the true cost of my wish might be far beyond my understanding. The darkness was not just a curse, it was a labyrinth of horrors, and I was trapped in its nightmarish depths. The night I confronted the shadowy figure was the culmination of a nightmare I could no longer escape. The air in my apartment felt thick with dread as I prepared for the final showdown. I had resolved to confront him, to wrestle control from the dark forces that had turned my life into a living hell. He appeared in my room, more menacing than ever. His form seemed to pulsate with an unnatural darkness, and his eyes glowed with a predatory hunger. I tried to outwit him, to bargain or trick him into releasing me from the curse. I pleaded, I reasoned, and I attempted to leverage every ounce of my desperation and cunning. But it was clear that the shadowy figure was far beyond the reach of mere human manipulation. As I struggled to break free, the true cost of my wish became horrifyingly clear. The figure revealed that the curse was never just about a simple sacrifice. It was about the price of the wish itself, an intricate, insidious web of malevolence that ensnared not just me, but anyone connected to my desires. The shadowy figure was not merely an agent of the curse, he was the embodiment of it, feeding off the suffering and despair of those who dared to tamper with the forbidden. The moment of truth arrived with a chilling revelation. The curse demanded a final, devastating price. My sacrifice, it turned out, was not just my life. It was the complete and utter annihilation of my existence, my identity, and my soul. In a horrifying twist, the true nature of the curse was that it would erase everything I was, leaving no trace of me behind. In the final moments, as the darkness closed in, I was left with a choice that was no longer mine to make. The figure's laughter echoed around me as my reality began to unravel. The darkness enveloped me, consuming my thoughts, my memories, and my essence. I could feel myself slipping away, my sense of self dissolving into the void. The story ends with a haunting uncertainty. Did I truly escape, or did I become another lost soul trapped within the deep web's twisted labyrinth? As the final threads of my consciousness faded, I was left questioning the true nature of the wish and the horrors that lay hidden in the shadows of the deep web. In the end, the deep web's darkness proved to be an abyss with no escape, where the cost of a single wish spiraled into a nightmarish infinity. The chilling reality of the curse left an indelible mark, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the forbidden corners of the digital world.
The mysterious video.
It was another typical Friday night, and the familiar haze of boredom had settled over my friends and me. We were sprawled on my living room floor, surrounded by empty snack bowls and half-hearted conversation. Someone suggested exploring the deep web, an idea that seemed both thrilling and just the distraction we needed. We gathered around my laptop, each of us eager to see what lurked in the shadowy corners of the internet. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, we clicked through various forums, encountering everything from unsettling conspiracy theories to eerie photographs. Our excitement grew with each disturbing find, but nothing could have prepared us for what we were about to discover. Our browsing led us to a link with a cryptic title, Too Disturbing for Mainstream. It promised a video that was supposedly so horrifying that it was banned from regular platforms. Intrigued, we clicked on it, the screen flickering to life as we huddled closer. The video began with a shaky, handheld camera view of what appeared to be an ordinary suburban house. The footage was grainy and unsteady, but it looked alarmingly familiar. As the camera panned through the rooms, the sense of déjà vu grew stronger. The layout, the furniture, everything was so similar to my own house that it made my skin crawl. We exchanged uneasy glances, trying to brush off the growing discomfort. But as the video progressed, our initial amusement turned to dread. Dark, shadowy figures moved through the rooms, and disturbing, cryptic messages appeared scrawled on walls. The scenes felt like something ripped from a nightmare, but the realization that it all seemed far too close to home made it even more horrifying. By now, the atmosphere in the room had shifted from light-hearted curiosity to an oppressive, uneasy silence. We watched in horror as the video revealed more and more details that echoed our own reality, setting the stage for a night that none of us would ever forget. As the video continued, it became apparent that this was no ordinary piece of disturbing footage. The scenes grew increasingly unsettling, depicting details about the house that matched our own home far too closely. Shadows moved in corners where no one should have been, and objects appeared in places that we hadn't left them. Our initial sense of curiosity quickly turned to terror. The video revealed more and more about the house, showing secrets we had never known existed. One particular segment depicted a hidden room in the basement, a space we had never seen or heard about before. Another scene showed a figure, shrouded in darkness but clearly human, watching from behind a door. The sight of that figure sent a chill down my spine. The atmosphere in the room grew unbearably tense. We began to notice how the details in the video seemed to align disturbingly with our own experiences. Sounds that we had previously dismissed as mere creaks and groans took on a new, menacing tone. Strange noises began to emanate from the direction of the basement, exactly where the video had shown that hidden room. Our laughter and chatter had long since evaporated, leaving behind a suffocating silence. We sat there, wide-eyed and trembling, as we tried to process what we were seeing. The once familiar comfort of my living room now felt alien and menacing, every creak and groan of the house amplified by our growing paranoia. Each new detail in the video seemed to push us further into a nightmarish reality, and we couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. In one of the final scenes, the video took a turn for the horrifyingly personal. The camera lingered on our living room, focusing on a clock that displayed the exact time we were watching. My heart pounded as I realized that the time on the screen matched the time on my own clock. The camera then panned slowly to a shadowy figure in the corner of the room, obscured and menacing. It was difficult to make out its features, but it felt as though the figure was moving deliberately closer to the lens. And then, it pointed directly at the camera with an unsettling, deliberate motion, an eerie gesture that seemed as though it was aimed directly at us. Panic exploded in the room as the implications of the video hit us. It was as if the video was not just documenting past events, but predicting what was about to unfold right before our eyes. The shadowy figure on the screen appeared to inch closer and closer, its presence growing more ominous with each passing second. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with dread. We began hearing strange, inexplicable noises from within the house, soft thumps and unnerving scratching sounds that seemed to come from just outside the walls. The noises were sporadic but persistent, growing louder and more insistent. It felt as if some unseen force was trying to claw its way inside. My friends and I exchanged terrified glances, our previous excitement and curiosity now replaced by sheer terror. Every creak of the floorboards and whisper of the wind outside seemed magnified, amplifying our fear. We huddled together, trying to rationalize the situation, but the fear was palpable. The eerie sense that whatever was depicted on the screen was somehow manifesting in our reality left us frozen, unable to move or speak. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the unsettling noises that seemed to be moving closer. The room felt colder, and a dark, oppressive feeling settled over us. Each shadow in the corners of our vision seemed to flicker with a malevolent intent, and the line between the video and our real-life horror began to blur. The video had transformed from a source of morbid curiosity to a terrifying omen, and as we sat in our living room, the fear of the unknown made every second feel like an eternity. The terror intensified as the video continued to play. We watched in horror as it showed unsettling scenes of people in our neighborhood, faces we recognized, caught in moments of fear and panic. The camera angles and locations matched our own neighborhood eerily well, and the shadows that moved through the frames began to feel disturbingly familiar. It wasn't long before the scenes on the screen began to overlap with our reality. The same dark shapes we saw on the video started to materialize in our home. Shadows flickered on the walls, darting just beyond our peripheral vision. Every creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind outside seemed amplified, heightening our fear with each passing moment. In a panic, we tried to turn off the video and disconnect from the deep web. My friend, James, frantically clicked on the touchpad, but the laptop screen was frozen. It flickered ominously, the video playing on a loop that we couldn't control. The pause and stop buttons were unresponsive, and every attempt to shut the laptop down was met with a mocking refusal. The realization that we were trapped in this nightmarish scenario began to sink in. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the air thick with an oppressive sense of dread. We could hear our own ragged breathing over the eerie background noise of the video, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker and more menacing. Desperate to escape, we raced to the front door, hoping to flee from the nightmare. But when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't budge. It felt as if an invisible force was holding it shut. We yanked and pulled, but the door remained firmly locked, as though someone, or something, was preventing us from leaving. We tried other exits, searching for windows or back doors that might offer an escape. Each one was blocked or seemed to lead to another layer of terror. Windows were stuck or appeared fogged up, making it impossible to see outside. The back door was jammed, and every attempt to force it open only heightened our sense of entrapment. The panic among us grew palpable. We could no longer differentiate between the threats from the video and the very real danger we felt surrounding us. The terror was not just a figment of our imagination, it was encroaching upon us, making it clear that our ordeal was far from over. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every passing second, and our sense of helplessness was suffocating. In our frantic state, we stumbled back to the living room, only to be confronted with the relentless, flickering video, its disturbing imagery and ominous predictions a constant reminder that we were trapped in this nightmare, with no clear way out. As we scrambled around the room in a state of sheer panic, the horror took a new, more sinister turn. The shadowy figure that had haunted the video was no longer confined to the screen. It was now in our house. We caught glimpses of it moving in the reflections of mirrors and windows, its presence an ever-looming menace that seemed to mock our futile attempts to escape. The figure moved with a deliberate, eerie precision, as if it were reenacting the scenes from the video just for us. It was as if the video had been a twisted rehearsal, and now the entity was performing its final act. Each time we thought we'd seen the last of it, the shadow would reappear in a different part of the room, its form flickering like a dark specter. We tried everything we could think of, shouting, banging on walls, and even attempting to confront the figure directly. But it was as if the video and the entity were puppeteering our actions, controlling our every move with a cruel, unseen hand. No matter how hard we tried to fight back or escape, the shadow seemed to anticipate and counter our every effort. The fear and confusion reached a fever pitch as the shadowy figure drew closer. The lines between the video and our reality had completely disintegrated. We could no longer tell where the video ended and where our nightmare began. The figure's presence was all-encompassing, filling every corner of the room with a palpable sense of dread. In the final, agonizing moments, everything became a blur of terror. We stumbled over each other in a frantic, desperate bid to find safety, but the shadow was relentless, always just a step behind us. Our screams filled the house, blending with the eerie soundtrack of the video that continued to play on an endless loop, a cruel reminder of our inescapable fate. The last scene of our nightmare was one of chilling ambiguity. The video's screen flickered and went black, leaving us in complete darkness. The shadowy figure's movements became more erratic, and then, as if on cue, everything went silent. We were left in a state of utter uncertainty, with no clear resolution to our harrowing ordeal. As the darkness enveloped us, it was impossible to tell whether we had managed to escape the horror or if we had succumbed to its relentless grasp. The final moments of our story left a haunting question hanging in the air. What was the true nature of the video, and what kind of terror truly lurks in the shadows of the deep web? The ambiguity of our fate remained, leaving a lingering sense of dread and unanswered questions about the dark forces that had manipulated our reality.
The chat room.
Most nights, I found myself alone in the dimly lit quiet of my apartment, searching for anything to break the monotony. My loneliness drove me to explore corners of the internet I normally wouldn't touch. One evening, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a desire for connection, I ventured into the deep web. I had heard rumors about it, a place where dark secrets and forbidden stories thrived. Navigating the murky depths of the deep web was unsettling but intriguing. I stumbled across a forum that seemed to promise the kind of intrigue I craved. It was a digital underworld where people shared tales of the macabre, their darkest secrets, and whispered conspiracies. The emptiness of the forum was eerie, with threads discussing sinister topics that seemed almost too real. It was like stepping into a shadowy alley, and though it felt dangerous, it also held a strange allure. I hesitated before clicking on a chat room that appeared to be the most active. The usernames and the cryptic conversations intrigued me. After a moment's hesitation, I entered the room and was immediately greeted by someone with the handle Nocturne. His response was swift, and there was something unnervingly familiar about his greeting. Nocturne seemed to know an unsettling amount about me, details I hadn't shared publicly. He mentioned my recent move to a new city, my job, and even my pets. The familiarity in his words was disconcerting but also oddly comforting. It was as if he could see right through the facade I wore every day. I was intrigued by Nocturne's apparent insight and the dark humor he used to discuss various macabre topics. The conversations flowed easily, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a connection to someone who seemed to understand the darker parts of life. It was a strange comfort, like finding a kindred spirit in the most unexpected of places. As our conversations continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Nocturne than just a friendly chat. Yet, the allure of this forbidden space and the connection I felt with him kept me coming back, even as a small voice in my head warned me to tread carefully. As the weeks passed, Nocturne became a fixture in my daily life. Our conversations quickly turned into a routine I relied on, his presence a constant in the void of my loneliness. His responses were always immediate, and there was an unsettling precision to his comments that left me feeling both intrigued and unnerved. It started with small, seemingly innocuous things. Nocturne would predict when I was about to have a particularly rough day or mention that he'd seen my car parked outside my apartment. At first, I chalked these up to coincidence or a lucky guess. But as time went on, these coincidences started to feel more like deliberate invasions of my private life. It wasn't just the knowledge of my daily routines that began to unsettle me, it was the way Nocturne seemed to manipulate my fears. He would talk about things like watching shadows move or hearing footsteps when alone, topics that suddenly felt alarmingly relevant to my own experiences. I had begun to hear odd noises in my apartment, footsteps that didn't match my own, creaks from unseen sources. Shadows seemed to dart just outside my peripheral vision, disappearing when I turned to look. These eerie occurrences were more than just unsettling, they were disturbing. The line between my waking reality and my fears began to blur. I found myself questioning whether these phenomena were real or simply figments of my imagination, spurred on by Nocturne's dark suggestions. The more I talked to Nocturne, the more my anxiety grew. It was as if he had tapped into a hidden part of my psyche, exploiting my deepest fears. Every night, I would lie awake, listening to the sounds of my apartment and wondering if I was truly alone or if something, or someone, was watching me. The comfort I once felt in our conversations had been replaced by a creeping dread that I couldn't escape. It was just another night, or so I thought, when I had one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. After a particularly unnerving conversation with Nocturne, my phone buzzed with a new message. I didn't recognize the number. It was anonymous. With a growing sense of dread, I opened the message, and my blood ran cold. The photo attached showed my apartment building, but it wasn't taken from the street. The angle was too close, as if the photographer had been standing just outside my window. I could see my own curtains in the image, slightly parted, and the dark outline of my living room. My heart pounded in my chest as the horrifying realization hit me. Nocturne was no longer just an online presence. He was physically near me. Panic set in, and I immediately tried to distance myself from Nocturne. I attempted to log off the forum, hoping that severing our connection would bring some relief. But my efforts to cut ties were met with immediate resistance. Nocturne's responses grew aggressive and threatening. His messages became more frequent, filled with explicit threats and disturbing details about my daily life. He seemed to know exactly when I left my apartment, what I did throughout the day, and even the moments when I was most alone. I would receive texts describing my routine with unnerving accuracy, and sometimes I would notice the chilling coincidence of a new threat arriving just moments after I'd been out of my apartment. The sense of being stalked was overwhelming. I would catch glimpses of movement outside my window and hear faint, unsettling noises from the hall. My home, once a place of safety, had turned into a prison of fear. Every creak, every shadow seemed to carry a dark significance, and Nocturne's relentless presence was a constant reminder of my vulnerability. Desperate for relief from the suffocating fear that had become my constant companion, I decided to go to the police. I explained everything, how Nocturne had escalated from unsettling online presence to a tangible threat. I showed them the disturbing photo and shared the threatening messages. But their response was disheartening. With no solid evidence and the bizarre nature of my claims, they were skeptical and could offer little in the way of assistance. Their lack of concern only heightened my anxiety. Feeling defeated, I made the decision to leave town for a few days, hoping that a change of scenery would disrupt the cycle of fear and provide a temporary escape from Nocturne's reach. I packed a small bag and drove out to a cabin in a remote area, thinking that isolation might offer some respite. But even here, I couldn't escape Nocturne. The messages continued, arriving with alarming regularity from different locations. It was as if he had an uncanny ability to track me, no matter how far I fled. His presence was relentless and pervasive. In the quiet of the cabin, the isolation that was supposed to be a relief only heightened my paranoia. I began seeing shadows that seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, reflections of Nocturne's dark silhouette appearing in mirrors and windows. The sound of his voice seemed to echo in the wind, whispering my name and taunting me with a chilling familiarity. Each creak of the cabin, each rustle of leaves outside, felt like an ominous sign. The sense of being hunted grew stronger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Nocturne was somehow always there, just out of sight. The terror was no longer confined to my apartment. It had followed me, wrapping its cold grip around every moment of my waking life. Returning home was the worst decision I could have made. As soon as I walked through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. My apartment had been thoroughly tampered with. Photos of me were scattered across the floor, and my personal belongings had been moved around in a disorienting mess. It was as if Nocturne had been waiting for my return, ready to ensnare me further in his web of terror. In a final, desperate bid to escape, I resolved to confront Nocturne directly. I logged into the forum one last time, hoping to find some clue, some way to end this nightmare. But instead of a confrontation, I was greeted by a chilling message that sent shivers down my spine. "You can't escape the web you've woven." The weight of those words crashed over me, and I realized the horrifying truth. I was trapped in a nightmarish cycle of my own making. No matter where I went or what I did, Nocturne's influence was pervasive and inescapable. It wasn't just a matter of leaving a chat room or shutting down a computer. It was a labyrinth of terror that had woven itself into every aspect of my life. The final moments were filled with a paralyzing dread. I understood that escaping this dark corner of the deep web wasn't possible. My life had become a horror story with no ending, a relentless nightmare that followed me everywhere. Nocturne's presence was now a constant in my reality, his shadow cast over every waking moment. As I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the disarray he had left behind, I felt the crushing reality of my situation. The web Nocturne had spun was inescapable, and I was trapped within its threads, forever caught in a cycle of fear and paranoia. The horror was no longer confined to the screen. It had become an inescapable part of my existence.